Welcome to Startup Stories. Our guest today is Deepak Giridharagopal. Um,
Hello.
Deepak, thanks for joining.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And Deepak, you're the CTO at Puppet. I want to go ahead and just jump right in. A lot of startups are struggling to build SaaS applications, that are future proof. When you were building Puppet's first SaaS product, Relay,
Mm.
how did you mitigate, some of the common challenges of building fast, while also ensuring that you were agile?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think to me, this is really the sweet spot of like the cloud in general. And I think that's because when you're starting out with a product, there's just so much uncertainty across all kinds of different dimensions. Like, is this the right problem to even solve? Are we going after the right users? Do we have the right approach, the right UX, the right pricing, go to market strategy? But here's the thing, and it's that in the beginning, you don't know. You don't have any answers to those questions. And you don't know because all the answers that you might have, they're all hypothetical. And I think those of us who've done startups before generally know that most hypotheses don't withstand first contact with the market. Everything sounds really great in your head, and then it's very different what the market actually wants. So because of that, I think I'm a strong believer in like you have to build things quickly so that you can learn quickly. Because in most markets, the companies that learn the quickest, I think, tend to win. I think the trick is that ordinarily, when you're building something new as fast as you can and iterating quickly, compromises are inevitable, right? Especially technologically. Like you don't pick certain tech battles, certain architectural battles because you don't have the time or the money to do so, right? So you end up mortgaging your future a little bit, hoping that you see some success in the market now and you earn the right to fix stuff up later. I mean, this is super classic. Anyone that's a CTO at an early stage startup or you're a co-founder, you're writing the code, like people talk about this phenomenon all the time. But I think if you're smart about what cloud technologies you pick, then you can mitigate a lot of these trade-offs because the cloud can give you a lot of smart primitives that are easy to start with and that will grow with your needs over time, which is great. So this is why when we built Relay, we used cloud services that didn't have too much upfront cost, but still gave us a ton of optionality going forward. Like we didn't have to mortgage our future, didn't have to make those compromises. And those options are good because you never truly know how the market's going to react to what you're doing. And you don't want to be caught unable to respond quickly, right, to user feedback. So this to me is like the real game changer, I think, that cloud brings to startups, and it just helps people learn quickly.
No, that's great. And take us back. You mentioned Relay. Take us back to prior to building it. What led Puppet to start thinking about the need to build a SaaS product?
Yeah, well, I think my background is in software development, systems engineering, and operations. So I think I resonate with this emotionally in a lot of ways. I think it's just tough out there for cloud operations teams. I think cloud infrastructure itself can be really complicated. Cloud native apps are increasingly complex and they're distributed with a ton of moving pieces. And there's a ton of different services in play in order to make the overall infrastructure hum. Like that's cloud providers, APIs between all your microservices, third party tools, the whole thing. So all of this is happening in a computing environment that by design is at a high rate of change with high velocity. And I think the struggle is real, if you're a cloud operations person. So Puppet's an automation company, and we're in the business of building automation tools for ops teams that help them wrap their arms around all this complexity. That's what we do. And it's why we've been a household name for operators for years. But we also know that solving automation problems in the cloud is often really about orchestrating change. And those changes involve talking to a huge variety of vendors, services, and APIs. And that's hard even for the most sophisticated ops teams, let alone the ops masses, like the 99% of operators out there. So these are the things that were top of mind when we built Relay. So for us, SaaS was ideal because it let us put automation tools in the hands of a wider audience in a quicker fashion. So no installation, vastly better user experience. We can hide all the complexity under the hood where the user doesn't have to deal with it, and all that good stuff that we think will help us solve the most problems for the widest audience in the shortest amount of time. So that's kind of the rationale behind the product and what it's aiming to do.
And as you built this, were there specific problems or challenges that you were up against?
Yeah, and I think aside from all the general business stuff, like is this a good product for the market? I think the the core abstractions that underlie or that underpin Relay are workflows, triggers, and steps. We think those are the right abstractions to let operations folks model in a pretty straightforward way all the different processes that they're trying to automate, whether that's automated policy enforcement or compliance, automated incident response, cost management. We think ultimately those are the right building blocks. But again, I mean, the cloud is pretty messy and there's tons and tons of tools that we need to wrap and a ton of APIs to talk to. So we need to give users the ability to create custom steps containing potentially arbitrary code, right? But we also want to do that in a way that's safe and controlled. Otherwise, the product experience wouldn't really work. So what problems were we trying to solve? I think we needed a way to efficiently run arbitrary customer supplied code. We need to do that in a super cost effective way, right? Like that's easy, that's trivial to do if you don't care about cost, right? Everyone gets their own server and things like that. But we needed to do that in a cost effective way where those workloads had good isolation from other customers. Because again, if it's ops teams, like isolation is super important. We need to have built-in support for all the tech that we use to build the product. So we use a lot of Kubernetes, we use a lot of serverless technologies and beyond. And we needed all of that and had to be available to us in a package that lets us iterate super quickly. Otherwise, the product really wouldn't work. It would have great extensibility, but it would be impossible for a user to use easily. Or it would be great and powerful, but we'd be upside down on cost. Or it would take us 12 years to build it, right? So we kind of it was that intersection of all those different problems that was the big thing, top of my mind.
Okay, that's interesting. And that kind of led you down the path to evaluating Google, and specifically,
Yep.
I know you built Relay on GKE.
Yep.
What stood out as you looked at that evaluation, and what were some of the benefits as you considered Google?
Yeah, that's a good question because I think from a distance, a lot of the clouds can look very similar, but I think GCP really checked most of the boxes for us, honestly. I mean, we're already using a lot of what I would say are Google centric projects, architectures, practices, and a lot of Google either first party or Google adjacent technologies like Kubernetes or Tekton or Knative. So I think the user experience for GCP and GKE is real, especially GKE, I think, is really, really good compared to other hosted options. And for us, that's a huge deal. Cloud Run had built-in support for the programming languages that we use, which was really ideal for us at the time. We wanted to take advantage of the features and kind of unique architectural possibilities and business possibilities that a framework like Cloud Run lets us do. And there were some unique features that really make Relay possible, like GKE Sandbox is an example. The earlier conversation about what technical challenges we have, stuff like GKE Sandbox or gvisor support, and that's huge for us from a security and customer trust standpoint. And lastly, and I think people sleep on this, but it's a big deal. I think we felt that the overall user kind of operational experience for dealing with GCP, GKE, Cloud Run was all really good. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's pretty great. And I mean, we're Puppet. We're an operations company after all. So the ops experience when dealing with the cloud is a huge deal for us. And a lot of folks fixate on cloud features, and I think they sleep on the overall cloud experience. But to us as operators, like that's a huge deal. So I think it made it a really solid choice for us.
No, that's a great explanation. I've heard some customers explain, hey, some cloud providers are like taking a car and putting all the pieces together custom.
Yeah.
GCP is like taking a brand new car and driving it off the lot, from
Yeah.
a very
And if you're in the business of I want to make 28 different vehicles, in a week, then sure. But if your goal is I just need to get to the grocery store to like pick up some food, then yeah, you just want the working product. And I think it's that ops mindset, I think, that we see evident in a lot of what we saw in GCP, GKE, et cetera.
So as you look back at the initiative, what made it successful? I mean, how did you kind of find the path to success?
Yeah, I mean that's the trick, isn't it? I mean, I think we basically optimized early on for learning. This maybe sounds a bit like a broken record, but I mean, we really optimized early on for learning as much as we could as quickly as possible. I mean, we started work on Relay in January of last year, and we released our first public beta a few months later, which, I guess in the sort of enterprise software world is considered, I would consider that extremely quick. And between then and now, I mean, we've refined the product a ton, made the user experience a lot better. And this is why I think picking some smart technologies early on really helped us, because it allowed us to go through that phase of development just super, super quickly. And, I mean, I truly believe that a powerful way to find success with a new product is to just constantly validate your ideas. So that's validation from partners, from early adopters, prospects, from your first customers. And I think in the world of enterprise software, users, I think, have been conditioned to just have these like depressingly really low expectations. And I don't know, like most enterprise software is just not very good, I think. Or it's such a sticky market. It doesn't have to be good. Someone 4 levels up bought this thing 12 years ago and now you have it and there's nothing you can do about it. So I think people have low expectations. Like this software is going to be slow. It's going to be crummy to use. It's going to evolve at this like absolutely glacial pace. So instead, what we did was we took our early adopters for Relay and we basically overwhelmed them with like love, attention, and responsiveness to anything they wanted us to change that we felt was harmonious with our vision of the product. So that helped us stand out in this sea of super slow, old school kind of last gen sort of enterprise software. And it really helped us create trust with the user community, which is huge, especially for an automation product. Like if your users don't trust you, no one's going to use you for anything. So I think that's why right now we've got some really great customers using Relay, from cutting edge like vertical farming companies to managed service providers. And I think it's because the user experience matters. Speed matters, the refinement matters, like all of it matters.
Yeah, and I think I'd be curious, Google Cloud wise. I mean, how did Google Cloud positively impact the product and the business and the top line?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely touched on a lot of this earlier, but overall, I mean, I think GCP really allowed us to bring our product to market super rapidly. Like if I distilled it down to the essence, I think using GCP allowed us to get to market really quickly with fewer compromises along the way. And I think both of those you need to have both. You can do a lot of stuff really quickly if you compromise a lot, and you can make no compromises and take forever to do something. So I think GCP really struck that balance for us in a way that the other competing offerings we were looking at really couldn't present us with as compelling, I think, of a total package. I think GCP support for open source tech and a lot of open standards, as well as, I'll say quote unquote the sort of modern like container oriented software development stack for building these kinds of apps, like that really helped give us the speed of development that we needed now and the optionality that we needed later. We didn't have to, it gelled really well. Philosophically, I think there was a lot of alignment. Technologically, there was a lot of alignment. Operationally, there was a lot of alignment. So so I think it just helped us move super quickly.
Definitely. I definitely think there's a lot of synergy between organizations when you look at things, from an open cloud perspective.
Yeah, and I mean it's a partnership, right? I think in a lot of ways, like I view the cloud less as it's a product that we use as much as it is like it's a partnership you enter into, because there's going to be new stuff, or so I think analyzing it from all these different dimensions is it's a big deal, and if so I think it's worth thinking about all those different angles up front if you can.
And I think that's a great transition to my last question: is what advice would you give to other CTOs when building cloud native products or choosing a public cloud provider to partner with?
How much time do we have? Let's see. I've been at Puppet for over 10 years, I think, at this point. And I scaling it up from like close to zero revenue to, we'll say a lot of revenue now. So I've learned a lot of lessons, and I've learned a lot of them the hard way, right? I think every CTO should have a complexity budget, is one way I think about it. You should have a complexity budget in mind when thinking about how to build new products. And you should spend that budget super thoughtfully on the places where you get the absolute best return. Like if it's the secret sauce for your product and you need that level of technical sophistication for it to work at all, then of course, that's where you spend that budget, you go for it. But oftentimes when I talk to other startups or CTOs, I think they prematurely optimize all sorts of stuff, thinking that you have to plan for these absurd levels of scale when you barely have any users yet, right? Like you overcomplicate the tech stack because that's what's fashionable, that's what everyone on Hacker News is talking about, or whatever it is, versus picking simpler stuff that might let you just iterate more quickly and hire from a broader set of people, right? the thing I love about the cloud is that it stretches your complexity budget in a lot of ways. Like you can get more for your money, so to speak, right? Because the cloud provider defrays a lot of the complexity because they're running the services on your behalf, which is great. And they could manage a lot of the scale up as well. For example, if you use stuff like we do, like Cloud Run. So when you're a startup, you have a secret weapon, I think, in this regard that most established players don't have, which is that you can do things that don't scale, right? Which is great. Like that's so powerful. Like every startup should take maximum advantage of the fact that they do not have, they are allowed to do things that don't scale. You can try things out. You can run super lean. You can be weird and you can be bold. And I think this is worth keeping in mind, especially if you're a CTO that's coming from a much larger company, right? Like you were working somewhere, it was a bigger corporate entity. Now you decided you want to try your hand at the startup game. You don't want to necessarily repeat a lot of the same playbook that you had before, right? Like, and I think if you're a CTO coming from a much larger company, you can run circles around your competition, if you take advantage of this. And so I think you should.
No, it's great. It's great advice. And to round us out, I mean, if I want to learn more about Puppet or Relay specifically, where should I get started?
Yeah, great question. So for folks can learn more about Relay, you can just hit the product site at relay.sh. So you can just check it out and let us know what you think. And if you're watching this and you are or you employ, cloud operations folks, I think you'll find a lot to like in the product. And I encourage folks to just think about how much manual stuff that you did when you had your last outage or your last security breach or your last disaster recovery or your last software rollback. So I think think it through, think about how awesome or in all likelihood not awesome and suboptimal those situations were. And I think we can help a lot of cloud operations folks sleep better at night. So yeah, check it out at relay.sh, or if you want to know more about Puppet, that's at puppet.com, or ask your friendly neighborhood systems engineer. They could probably tell you.
Amazing. Well, hey, Deepak, great to catch up. And thanks again for joining the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.